We're almost into the final month of the baseball season. Football is just around the corner. It's about to be fall. Only a couple of weeks left, really. So if you're not at the top of the standings, maybe just kind of let that team ride. Wrong. You've got to be active up until the end. Keep fighting, making those smart waiver wire moves. So let's go over some players that can still help you down the stretch. So I'm going to do things backwards today. I usually start with hitters, then pitchers, then I save those closers and bullpen options for last. So let's flip it because I want to start out by talking about a guy you must add if he's out there, at least if you're in a league that uses saves. Yennier Cano of the Baltimore Orioles. It's been a great season for Baltimore, but they just got their first real piece of adversity here. All-star elite closer Felix Bautista hitting the IL and possibly being out for the season, if not a lot longer. UCL trouble, never a good thing. It's not often these days that a closer is talked about as a contender for the Cy Young Award, but that's how good Bautista has been. Well, that's over, at least for this year. And so who's going to step up? It's going to be Cano. He's going to be the closer. Got 5 saves, just picked one up. But that's because he's been stuck behind Bautista all year. You might remember I actually mentioned him as a waiver wire pickup a long time ago, early in the season, because even though he wasn't anywhere close to being a candidate for saves, he was that good. 1.62 ERA, 0.98 whip on the season. You might recall he started the season on an epic stretch where he not only didn't give up any runs, but he didn't even walk a single batter for the first, 23, 27 innings, something insane. He didn't even walk anybody. That finally ended, but still, elite ratios. He can strike batters out, and now he's going to pick up saves, so anywhere that he's out there, go grab him. Now here's an exciting young pitcher who just made his debut and could be worth adding. Of course, you don't want to get swept away by just one start, but Jordan Wicks was pretty impressive in his debut for the Cubs. In just 5 innings, got 9 strikeouts against the Pirates. Now granted, that was against the Pirates, but still, this is a pitcher who is interesting for a couple of reasons. Now in Double-A, he really didn't post elite stats, had a 3.82 ERA and a strikeout rate just about 22%. But he had been a lot better in terms of getting those whiffs before then. This guy has a 5-pitch mix, which is really interesting, and he's got a plus changeup that can throw batters off balance. Not a guy who's a must-add everywhere, but I think worth a speculative pickup in deep enough leagues. And then a very familiar name, a pitcher who's finally back from injury. I always take that wait and see approach to see if guys are going to have their stuff back, if they're going to stay healthy. Well, so far, Hyunjin Ryu, who is in Toronto, has done that. 3 straight starts with a win, and he's gone 5 innings each time. Not only that, but he's striking out a batter per inning. That would be 15 Ks. This is the classic case of crafty, kind of older veteran pitcher who knows how to get by with his stuff and his command. He's doing a good job. And here's what's even more appealing about him. If you grab him now, his upcoming schedule, they're going to face teams like Colorado, Oakland, and Kansas City. So good chance his next couple of starts are going to be just as successful. And then before moving on to hitters, I also want to mention a guy that I talked about last week, and I'm going to talk about him again. Still going to go out and pick up everywhere. Cole Ragans in Kansas City. I'm not going to go too into detail because I already went over everything I like about him in last week's video, and you might have already seen that. Since I mentioned him in his last start, racked up 11 Ks against Oakland. Sure, another case where he was facing kind of a pitiful lineup. Well, his next start is scheduled to be against Pittsburgh. Reagan's a guy I cannot recommend enough. Grab him pretty much anywhere that he's eligible. It's time for the hitters. Quick reminder though, if you have not yet become a rival, it's a good time to do that. Go to joinrival.com/endgamemlb or just go and download that app, the Rival Fantasy app, and use promo code endgamemlb. That will get you a deposit match, and you can try fun challenges, player versus player, but also fantasy bingo. Code endgamemlb. You can check that link in the description below. All right, now on the offensive side, we haven't had a lot of young players come up this past week. We're going to get to some oldies, though, and let's start with a guy who is probably been the hottest hitter in the past week. You use the term streaky to describe some players, and, to some extent, every hitter has his streaks, but I don't think there's a streakier player ever than Adam Duvall, who's with the Red Sox. Some thought he might get moved at the deadline. He didn't. You remember the very beginning of the year, I'm talking the first week of this season, he was pretty much the best player in fantasy for a week, and then he got hurt. and then he just wasn't the same since then, was cold. Well, now he's picked it back up again. He homered in 3 straight games versus Houston last week, took a couple days off, and then homered again against the Dodgers. He's going to face Houston again in an upcoming series. I mean, you cannot deny the fact that when the guy is on, he is on. So go ahead and get in on that and stream him if you can. Another hot player who, well, really has kind of become an afterthought because some lackluster results, some injuries. Seiya Suzuki isn't universally owned, even though he was drafted in most leagues this year. He's been on fire. Right now he's got an 8-game hitting streak, and he is hitting .354 just in the month of August. He does have some power, but it's not just relying on the long ball. In fact, what Suzuki is helping with the most is scoring runs. The Chicago lineup is starting to get with it again. The Cubs hanging around there. He scored 8 runs just in the last week, and that seems to be his main appeal. Suzuki, a little bit of a do-it-all player, but again, looking for help with runs scored, average. Just looking for a guy who's extremely talented and just had not put it together for an extended period. Maybe finally this is Suzuki's time. And I can just tell you straight up, this season, pretty much all season until this past week, Josh Rojas has been a massive bust. In fact, Arizona kind of just unceremoniously shipped him off. He's in Seattle now, fighting for playing time. Well, it looks like he is getting it because he's finally doing something with the bat. 10 hits in his last 22 at-bats. But what's interesting here, now Rojas does have some power, but what he's helping in is speed. This is kind of your surprise hidden source of steals late in the season. Rojas does have some speed, but not really a huge base stealing threat. Kind of been like a low-key 15-15 threat. You know, when you look at him on draft day, he's appealing because he can help in all categories, just not a really high-end kind of asset. But 3 steals in the past week. They're letting him loose in the base paths. He's getting on base. He qualifies at both second and third base, so this makes him appealing in fantasy. You know what? I can't say how long it's going to last, but Rojas is in a good situation. He's got the talent, so he's finally figuring it out this year. And then it may surprise you to know that not just this past week or two, but all month, Kerry Carpenter of the Tigers has actually been pretty good. No player has driven in more runs over the past week than Kerry Carpenter. That's right, 4 homers and 11 RBIs. But this is not just a recent thing. Over the past month, he has 9 home runs. Only 5 players in the majors have gone deep more than him, and he's been driving in runs with 22. That means that puts him top 10 in RBIs for the month of August. I mean, I didn't even realize this, but looking at his season-long stats, he's up to 20 homers now, and he's batting .290. You might think there's not a ton of RBI opportunities in Detroit, which is why he's been pretty much ignored, but they're kind of picking it up. Spencer Torkelson coming alive a little bit. You know, this team is nothing close to a contender, but it doesn't matter because, like I said, late season is when some of these teams who just know they're out of it and give these young players a chance and have no pressure on them, they can just get out there and get loose and just go for stats. Carpenter has been kind of a promising young player with some pop. It looks like he's put it together. So anywhere that you need some help in the outfield, Carpenter looks like a nice pickup. Keep it locked here until the season is over for more baseball advice. And also, don't forget to follow us for fantasy football if you play or if you want to start learning how to play. This is the time. We got you covered. Check out Fantasy Football Endgame and subscribe.